Chapter 2. Confrontations Impossible to Avoid. In a majestic castle nestled in the heart of a dense forest, there lived a 12-year-old red-haired girl. The castle of Stormride, with its towering spires and stone walls adorned with ivy, was a haven of tranquility and beauty. The leaves of the surrounding trees whispered in the wind, creating a soft melody that contrasted with the more intense sounds echoing from the training yard. There, in the middle of a spacious practice area, Lyanna Stormride was training with her sword. Under the guidance of her mentor, Garath Thorne, a knight renowned and respected throughout the eastern continent, Lyanna honed her skills with enthusiasm and dedication. Garath, a man of noble bearing clad in gleaming armor and with a perpetually calm demeanor, observed the young girl's every move with great care.
Well done, Lyanna. Remember to maintain your balance and posture,
Garath said, his deep voice resonating with authority. Lyanna nodded with a smile, adjusting her stance. Her movements were agile and precise, reflecting both her innate talent and the rigorous instruction of her mentor. As she continued her exercises, memories of that morning resurfaced in her mind.
Master Garath,
Lyanna began.
I noticed my stepfather was grumpier than usual this morning. Do you know why that might be?
Garath paused, lowering his sword. A faint, rare smile appeared on his usually serious face as he turned to the girl.
Grumpier than usual?
He questioned, prompting the redhead to nod in response.
Well, Lyanna, I suppose his sour mood stems from some serious issues affecting the entire eastern continent. The North will soon stop exporting Starlight, and now the East and West are at odds over how to handle the situation. Your stepfather, as Duke and second ruler of the Eastern Kingdom, has many responsibilities and decisions to make.
Lyanna frowned, her young yet inquisitive mind trying to grasp the complexity of the matter. As she continued her sword movements, she asked,
Why is there so much disagreement over Starlight? If it's so important, why does the North get to control it?
Garath looked at Lyanna, admiring her curiosity and her desire to understand.
Starlight is a very valuable resource, and it only comes from the high mountains of the northern continent. Its green glow and unique properties make it coveted across all the cardinals. The eastern and western cardinals currently lack the means to manage its exportation. Besides, the North has been handling Starlight for years, hundreds of years. It would be tedious and very slow for the East and West to take over the mines.
Garath explained. His gaze, though stern, held a special glimmer reserved only for his young apprentice.
But the North, unlike the East and the West, is governed by a guild, not kings or dukes. Their lands are frozen and difficult to inhabit, so they cannot create cities like we do. Instead, they specialize in extracting Starlight from their mountains.
Lyanna immediately saw a flaw in the situation.
But if their lands are so inhospitable, how do they survive? They can't possibly have livestock or crops.
Garath nodded slowly, acknowledging the girl's sharp observation.
You're right. Many would think the East and the West send them supplies in exchange for the exportation of Starlight. However, ancient treaties between the cardinals require the eastern and western continents to sustain the North.
Lyanna frowned, about to ask another question, but her mentor spoke first.
Starlight isn't just the North's main livelihood. In the less inhospitable areas of their continent, there are plantations and small settlements. Still, if they stop receiving the benefits provided by the cardinals, their resources could become limited. Furthermore, the Duke of the East wants to abolish the centuries-old treaty between the cardinals, a treaty that ensures the maintenance of the Northern Guild.
Lyanna nodded, her eyes gleaming with understanding as she tried to absorb the information.
But what exactly is Starlight? Why does the North extract it, and why do the other continents need it?
There are several reasons, but primarily because high-value coins used for trade are made of Starlight. If Starlight imports cease, the fear of running out would lead many to hoard the coins instead of spending them, which would negatively impact commerce.
The redhead nodded and asked another question.
If that's the case, why don't we switch to a different currency?
Any change takes time, and this one in particular would be slow. there would be a lot of work involved. I don't know exactly how much it would cost to create new coins, but I know we couldn't afford to wait that long.
Lyanna observed her teacher attentively and continued with her inquiries.
Besides the coins, why is it so important for the North to export stallite?
Well, it's unknown exactly when stallite began to be exported, but it's a very resilient mineral. Used with other materials like metal, it can create solid structures and formidable weapons. Moreover, apart from coins, the elites of the Eastern and Western Cardinals wear jewelry made exclusively from stallite. For example, my sword is crafted from an alloy of metal and stallite,
said Garath with a slight smile.
The North, although they don't want to admit it, relies on stallite exports to sustain their way of life. But now, according to them, the mines have collapsed due to a cave-in, and they'll soon stop exporting stallite. The other continents are worried. The East and the West disagree on how to approach the situation. Some believe the North is lying about the mine collapse and intends to take complete control of the stallite. Others think we should negotiate peacefully and try to confirm if the North is lying or not. But everyone agrees that if the North doesn't resume stallite exports, there will be many problems across the Cardinals.
Lyanna observed her mentor, raising her sword again and continuing the movements she was practicing with the weapon.
Why did the mines collapse?
According to the North, it's because, after extensive explorations in the Glaciaris mountain, they discovered a strange mystical force that caused the cave-in. Now, they want to proceed cautiously. They fear the mines might collapse completely if they use more drastic methods to reopen them.
Lyanna frowned, confused by the revelation.
A mystical force? Do they mean magic or something else?
Garath understood the redhead's unease and replied.
The miners of the North still uphold the ancient traditions of the three continents. They are superstitious and believe in a spectral and very powerful threat hiding within Glaciaris. Specters of the darkness, I think they call them. They're humanoid beings, lifeless, who absorb a person's essence and turn them into one of their own. Or something like that. It's hard to say. I've heard countless variations of the specter stories, each more surreal than the last.
Lyanna stopped her movements and stared intently at her mentor.
It seems you consider the miners' beliefs false. What do you think, Master Garath? What should we do?
Garath sighed, his expression turning pensive.
It's a complicated question, Lyanna. First of all, what I believe is irrelevant to the world. Their beliefs and legends might just be myths, but there could also be some truth to them. However, honestly, there's no evidence to prove those beings exist. It's true that in this world there are people who possess qualities different from others, but to believe in a magical threat that causes minds to collapse, I don't know. I've fought in battles and trained hard, and I know that, in humanity, nothing is truly magical.
Approaching a rock away from the training area, Garath sat down on its surface.
Unity, peace, and diplomacy are always fairy tales they try to make us believe. So difficult to harmonize. Peace requires sacrifices, while diplomacy is quite the opposite. The more manipulation and deceit, the better. And if you have to take a few down to gain advantages, so be it.
Lyanna nodded, absorbing her mentor's words. Her mind processed the information, reflecting on the complexities of power, diplomacy, and responsibility.
The three continents are truly one kingdom. That's what my instructor says when teaching me about the functions of our world. However, it seems we are more divided than we claim. Master, are we truly united?
She asked, seeking clarification. Garath nodded.
In theory, yes. Although the North does not have a king like the other two cardinals, it is also considered a kingdom. Together, we are three kingdoms that belong to one, which is why we call ourselves cardinals. But while we consider ourselves a united realm, each continent is autonomous in many respects. Over hundreds of years, we've drifted apart, each looking after its own interests. This separation creates discord among us.
Lyanna smiled, gaining a clearer understanding of the complex world she lived in. Despite her youth, she was determined to learn and comprehend, preparing herself to one day take her own role in shaping the events of her world. Lyanna approached her mentor and sat beside him on the rock.
Master Garath.
Lyanna began, her gaze fixed on a specific point on the ground.
Do you think the South, Erial, will also get involved in these political discussions? Could they influence the decision of the continents to wait for the North to reopen the mines and resume exporting stallite?
Garath remained silent for a moment, his expression shifting to one of reflection. Lowering his gaze, he looked at Lyanna with a mix of seriousness and weariness.
Lyanna, Erial lives in a world of its own. Its inhabitants are mostly indigenous, isolated, and uninterested in the affairs of the other continents. The leaders of the East and the West don't consider them a relevant political force. They see themselves and their needs as the most important, which is why it's unlikely they'll concern themselves with Erial.
Lyanna frowned, absorbing her mentor's words.
Then Erial won't influence any of this,
she murmured, more to herself than to Garath.
But what will happen if the North cannot reopen the mines and tensions between the East and the West rise? Could that lead to war?
Garath looked around to ensure no one else was listening, then leaned closer to Lyanna, lowering his voice to a whisper.
It's very likely. If the North stops exporting stallite, tensions between the East and West will escalate. They already have their differences, and this will just be another reason to clash. They fear losing access to stallite, and what that would mean for their economies and power. Indeed, I believe it could trigger a war.
Lyanna felt a knot tighten in her stomach at those words.
And if that happens, Master? Will you have to fight for the East as the knight you are?
Garath nodded somberly, his gaze fixed on the horizon.
Yes, Lyanna. If war breaks out, I'll have to march to battle. It's my duty as a knight to defend our land and our interests. But don't think for a moment it's something I do with enthusiasm.
Lyanna noticed the bitterness in her mentor's voice.
Master, you always tell me to avoid confrontation if I can. You say war only brings death and that there are no real winners.
Garath let out a deep sigh, and for a moment, the unyielding facade of the knight crumbled, revealing the man behind the armor.
I am not a noble knight, Lyanna. I don't want to participate in any battle, especially not over a fucking mineral.
The knight glanced at the young redhead and apologized for his words.
I'm sorry.
Lyanna gave him a soft smile and shook her head faintly, signaling that it was nothing. Garath returned the gesture with a faintly affectionate expression before continuing.
War brings death and suffering, and I don't wish for that. I'm selfish, Lyanna. Fighting for stallite, as valuable as it is, isn't worth what I stand to lose.
Lyanna nodded slowly, grasping the weight of Garath's words.
There must be something we can do. Is there any way to prevent the war? Maybe I could try speaking with my stepfather.
Lyanna pondered carefully. Lord Lyanna Stormride, the Duke of the Eastern Continent, was a stern man, reluctant to accept the will or opinions of others. Additionally, her stepfather didn't hold Lyanna in high regard. Though he had allowed her to train with Master Garath, Eden always belittled and undervalued her.
Though I highly doubt my stepfather will listen to me,
she murmured, her voice tinged with both determination and resignation. Garath smiled and stood up again, grabbing his sword, which he had rested against the rock. He gestured that they should continue training.
There is nothing we can do, Lyanna. The kings and leaders of the East and the West are the only ones who truly make decisions. The rest of us can only hope they make the right one.
Lyanna's training continued under the midday sun, with each sword strike and every lesson imparted by Garath strengthening not only her body but also her spirit and mind. Deep down, the redhead knew that difficult times lay ahead and felt a profound helplessness in her heart. Meanwhile, in the distant southern continent of Erial, there was a majestic city called Sabla Urbo. At its heart stood an imposing temple, the residence of the Shantric, a title equivalent to a king, Theodric Electida. The temple, built of golden stone and adorned with intricate mosaics, was a symbol of power and devotion. In one of the temple's grand and luxurious meeting halls, a heated dispute was taking place between Shantric Theodric and his advisors. Voices echoed off the walls, adorned with tapestries depicting the city's history and the divine acts with which it was blessed.
"This is unacceptable,"
exclaimed one of the advisors, his face flushed with indignation.
"The cardinals have always looked down on us, and now they relegate us to misery by cutting off our stalite imports. Let the crap always fall on Erial first, that's what the cardinals think. How much longer must we endure this?"
Shantric Theodric, a man in his 40s with a commanding presence, a thick beard, and piercing eyes, listened attentively, his expression grave but controlled. He knew he had to maintain calm and authority amidst the storm brewing among his advisors. Another counselor, a Tizakar, second in command in Sabla Urbo, named Hazim Domovan, known for his sharp intelligence and cunning, stepped forward, an enigmatic smile spreading across his face.
"You're Shantric, this could benefit us,"
he said, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. The murmurs grew louder, and Shantric Theodric raised a hand to call for silence.
"Explain yourself, Hazim,"
he ordered, his voice firm and authoritative. Hazim nodded, his smile widening.
"I have received information that the North has had to close the stalite mines. This has caused great tension among the cardinals. The East and the West are on the brink of war, as both want to control this valuable resource. Their leaders are too proud to yield and will fight to see who sends soldiers to the North first."
"And how does that benefit us? It's not the first war the cardinals have had. If I recall correctly, the last confrontation they had was on their island of Ontramar, many years ago,"
commented a skeptical advisor.
"But this time it's different.
Continued Hazim, his voice full of conviction.
We have the advantage in our favor. Estalita is essential for them, and the North will be able to export this mineral until its refineries are empty. That's why they decided to stop sending us Estalita. However, when the Estalita runs out, the cardinals will enter into a certain war. I predict this will happen in about 4 months."
Hazim's smile widened, a plan forming in his mind.
"The war will last for years. The forces of the East and the West will be decimated, and when they form a pact to invade the North, the climate of that continent will be relentless. Many of the cardinals' soldiers will perish in those frozen lands. Their armies will weaken over time, fighting not only against the cold but also among themselves. We, in Erial, can prepare our forces in silence, waiting for the right moment."
Shantric Theodric looked at Hazim with interest, beginning to see the logic in his words.
"Are you suggesting that Sabla Urbo prepare to attack when they are at their weakest?"
Hazim smiled, his expression tinged with meaningful darkness.
"Not Sabla Urbo, your Shantric, but all of Erial."
The Shantric leaned back in his seat, resting his elbows on the meeting room table as Hazim continued.
"The War of the Cardinals will last for years, and during that time, your Shantric will have the chance to finally strengthen the union of the 5 cities that make up the northern region of Erial,"
said Hazim.
"Strengthening Erial for a common purpose would be an opportunity to leave behind the differences among the other cities."
Theodric replied.
"Exactly, your Shantric. We all know the instability that exists in the 5 cities, the desert has distanced us, and this situation might strengthen our unity."
Hazim agreed, his eyes shining with enthusiasm.
"And when the cardinals are exhausted and without forces to defend them, we will send our fresh and well-prepared warriors to conquer their lands. This is our chance to shift the balance of power in our favor."
The council fell into reflective silence. Some advisors still showed signs of doubt, but others began to see the potential in Hazim's plan.
"Forgive me, your Shantruk, but I see complications with the possibilities presented by Tezakar Hazim Domovan,"
began one of those present, who wore golden armor and whose expression was marked by airs of military training.
"What do you mean, Derek Gillard, Garrison of my Sentinels?"
asked the Shantric. Derek, a middle-aged man in charge of leading the defense soldiers of Sabla Urbo and protecting the Shantric, rose and stated,
"We won't have enough soldiers to invade the Cardinals. The number of warriors our city currently has is fewer than 5,000 men. And we know that the other cities of Erial are in a similar situation. Together we will not be able to gather more than 15,000 troops.
The Shandrik immediately grasped what his commander of sentinels was asserting. One reason why the South had never decided to invade the Cardinals was precisely due to military complications. Erial was mostly a desert land with few cities. The trained men capable of fighting for the continent were scarce compared to those of the 3 other continents.
And the dynamis? It is known that those from the south could provide over 50,000 men. These indigenous people live beyond the great mountains and the vast desert that separates us. Forging an agreement with them might work to our advantage.
The Shandrik considered the possibility. The dynamis were a people who had settled in the ruins of the once great cities of Elorion. The dynamis sought to preserve the legacy of the Elorians, an advanced civilization that had thrived 1,000 years ago in the lands of Erial until its unforeseen and still unexplained extinction left their city destroyed and its remnants scattered across the desert. The Shandrik knew that the dynamis had no interest in confrontation with other realms, making it unfeasible to convince them to join the struggle.
Those indigenous people have no interest in helping Erial grow and become a respectable continent,
commented an advisor, causing many to nod in agreement. The council was in full swing. Voices mingled in a cacophony of opinions and strategies. Many advisors, driven by deep resentment toward the 3 cardinal continents, tried to propose measures to prepare an army and take advantage of their adversaries' possible future weakness. The room was charged with tension and determination, reflecting the emotions stirring each of those present. The Shandrik Theodric Electita Anu observed his advisors with a penetrating gaze, assessing every word and gesture. He knew this was a unique opportunity to unify Erial and strike the cardinal continents when they were weak. The possibility of consolidating his power and transforming Erial into an unstoppable force filled him with cold resolve. A middle-aged advisor, with a well-groomed beard and an imposing posture, spoke up.
Your Shandruk, to achieve our goals, we will need conscription. Every free, male, and able citizen must be trained and compelled to join our ranks. Only then can we form an army worthy of the task ahead.
The room was filled with murmurs of approval, though not everyone shared the same enthusiasm. A young advisor, his voice trembling, stood up with a worried expression.
It will not be enough. Our young citizens are neither numerous nor ready for such a great war. We will need more men, more resources.
A thin, shrewd figure, Councillor Darian Ilanov, known for his wit and pragmatism, intervened.
Then, I propose another solution. If we want warriors to fight for our cause, one of the best options we have is to hire mercenaries.
Silence fell over the room. Everyone present knew mercenaries were unreliable, their loyalty swayed by the highest bidder. Though the Cardinals, after their conflict, likely wouldn't have enough resources to outbid them, it was clear that Erial couldn't afford the expense either.
The coffers do not have enough wealth to afford the expense of hiring mercenaries,
remarked the treasurer. Darian Ilanov, with a smug smile, continued, revealing his strategy.
That is why I suggest your Shantrek marry the daughter of a powerful and respected merchant in Erial. This alliance would not only allow us to hire mercenaries with the merchant's resources but also consolidate the other cities under his leadership.
Shandrik Theodric tilted his head, contemplating the proposal.
Who is the merchant? And what is his daughter like?
Darian Ilanov smiled cunningly.
The merchant's name is Reynard Zendel, a man who has gained great influence and wealth in Erial in recent years. I have been suggesting to Zelira Zendel for some time that he join Su Shantrek's council, but he does not seem interested so far. His daughter, Inesil Zendel, is young, pure, and remarkably beautiful. She would be an ideal consort for you, your Shantrek. An alliance with the Zendel family would provide us with the resources and legitimacy for our cause.
The mention of Reynard Zendel's name and the description of his daughter immediately captured the Shandruk's attention. The idea of marrying a young, beautiful woman began to appeal to him, not only for the strategic benefits but also for the personal pleasures it might bring.
A young and beautiful consort,
murmured Theodric, nodding slowly as a smile appeared on his face.
That would benefit us in many ways. Yes, I think this could work.
The Shandruk's decision was met with nods and approving smiles among the advisors. It was a bold strategy that could change Erial's destiny and put them in a position of power against the cardinal continents. In the heart of the wealthiest district of Sabla Urbo, a luxurious mansion stood imposingly, distinguished by its elaborate architecture and manicured gardens. Inside its walls, sunlight filtered through the large windows, softly illuminating the room of a 16-year-old girl with silver hair and intense green eyes. This young girl, Inisal Zendel, was in her room speaking with her maid, Isra. Isra, a woman of similar age to Inisal, with dark hair and expressive eyes, had been bought as a slave. However, Inisal always referred to her as her maid and friend. To Inisal, slavery was a detestable practice, and she treated Isra with respect and kindness. Both were seated in a corner of the room, chatting as Isra combed her mistress' long silver hair.
"Seems like the master will soon be back home again,"
commented Isra with a soft smile.
"I've heard the master is searching for suitors for you. I still can't believe you convinced him not to marry you off sooner. Women, daughters of powerful merchants like the master, usually marry at 12.
Inisal let out a frustrated sigh, shaking her head slightly in disdain for Erial's traditions.
"I fight for my rights. You know I don't see that as an option for me. Isra, I won't become anyone's property. My freedom is the most important thing to me."
Isra nodded, understanding Inisal's feelings. She knew her mistress was a strong and determined woman with clear ideas about her future.
"You are different from many other young women, Inisal. And not just in appearance, I feel your strength and spirit are unmatched. But you can't change traditions, women in Sabla Herbo can't choose."
Inisal sighed, knowing her tenacity had merely delayed the inevitable. She knew it was only a matter of time before her adoptive father came in to announce he had found a suitable suitor for her. Inisal despised feeling like a commodity, and although her adoptive parents cared deeply for her, traditions blinded them.
"I know marriage is inevitable. But I feel I must fight for my freedom and that of others."
She turned to look at her maid.
"Just as I want to give you freedom, Isra, and respect you as my equal, I also want the world to change. I want the same spirit you see in me to bring something good for our people."
Isra nodded, intently observing her mistress' emerald green eyes. She knew Inisal was strong and determined, but she also knew that, as a woman, society would inevitably swallow her spirit.
"I want the best for you, Inisal. No matter what I am, I'll always be eternally grateful for the way you treat me with respect and as a human being. But I also recognize my place, Inisal. In this room, I can be your friend, but when I leave, I must be your slave."
Isra began.
"We can't fight against our traditions and customs."
Inisal stood up with vigor, her brow furrowing obstinately.
"One day, Isra, I will change things, and I promise you.
She leaned down to gently take her maid's hands.
I will give you freedom. One day, you'll stop being a slave."
Isra smiled and stood. Before any contradiction to Inisal's words could be spoken, a knock came at the door of the merchant's daughter's quarters.
"Come in."
"I apologize for interrupting, my lady, but the master has arrived,"
informed a slave, bowing his head and awaiting permission to leave.
"Thank you, Tecker. We'll come down now, you may go."
Inisal and her maid quickly headed toward the dining room, where Reynard Zendel, Inisal's adoptive father and one of the most influential merchants in Erial, had just returned from a long business trip. Reynard was at the table with his wife, Deorum Zendel. Inisal entered the dining room with a radiant smile.
"Father, such a joy to see you again."
Reynard stood to embrace his daughter.
"Inisal, dear, it's good to be back. I have important news to share with you."
Reynard spoke affectionately. After warm greetings, they all sat down, prepared to hear Reynard's news. The merchant began discussing the political situation in the 3 cardinal continents.
Astalita has stopped being exported from the north.
Reynard said gravely.
This has caused significant tension between the east and west. The mineral export first stopped reaching Erial, and soon, the other cardinals will cease receiving Astalita. If this continues, it's likely the continents of east and west will go to war.
Reynard continued, pointing out the likelihood of conflict if the situation persisted. Inisal frowned, worried about the consequences of these events.
A war. By the gods, I thought the cardinals were different from Erial. So superior that they consider themselves above us, and here they are, arguing over a stupid stone.
Reynard and Diora exchanged a glance, smiling at their daughter's statement. Diora was the first to respond, her voice filled with pride.
Inesil is right. It's ironic to see how those who believe themselves better than us can fall into the same trap of greed and war.
Reynard nodded.
Certainly, my daughter. But this situation also gives us an opportunity in Erial.
His daughter looked at him with a raised eyebrow, the delight shining in her green eyes.
If the cardinals are weakened in the war, Erial could seize the opportunity.
Inesil looked at her father, her expression becoming more serious.
I think Erial can barely sustain itself. Taking advantage of the cardinals' war and waiting for their forces to weaken to attack them could be useful at first, but in the long run, it would mean more losses for Erial.
Her father looked at her curiously, crossing his arms over the table.
Why do you say that, my daughter?
Inesil smiled and confirmed.
Erial wouldn't have enough resources to keep the 3 continents under control. We would conquer the cardinals only to lose them after a few years.
Reynard laughed, his sound echoing through the silence of the dining room.
You have a very sharp mind, Inesil. You would be an exemplary ruler.
Her father began, pride coloring his words.
You are right. In the long run, it wouldn't benefit us to conquer the cardinals. Erial wouldn't have enough resources to keep them, and we would lose them in a short time.
Reynard looked at his wife and gently placed his hand over hers.
I knew the goddess had blessed us with a unique and special daughter,
commented her father. Inesil sighed with growing irritation. It seemed her father's affectionate words had caused an opposite effect to what he intended.
Let's not start again, father. I've already told you, I'm not special, I'm just trying to find the best solutions to the difficulties we face. I believe the world would be better if we stopped fighting among ourselves.
Her parents looked at her with a love impossible to match. From the moment they had adopted Inesil, their lives had been filled, and the constant void tormenting their hearts had been replaced by the warmth and vitality she emanated.
Once again, I agree with my daughter. You are my treasure. You are the chosen one of the gods, my great pride.
Her father commented playfully, clearly intending to provoke his daughter. Inesil stood with a radiant smile, shaking her head as she watched her parents begin to laugh at the young woman's extravagant reaction.
You're something else,
she commented, causing her parents to look at her with smiles on their lips.